Welcome to the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Denver City Council. Full coverage of this session of the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee begins now.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Land Use, Infrastructure, and Transportation Committee. I'm Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, and I will be chairing until Councilman Chris Herndon can join us. We have 3 action items in front of us this morning, but let's first start going around the room, and I'll start at the very end of the dais to my right with introductions.
Good morning, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Jamie Torres, District 3.
Good morning, Kendra Black, District 4.
Good morning, Paul Cashman, South Denver, District 6.
Thank you all for joining us. Our first action item is Bill 0469, and I believe Jason will be giving the staff report. Jason, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, and we will get started.
All right, good morning, committee members. Jason Morrison, Community Planning and Development. We'll be presenting the proposed rezoning at 1895 North Quebec Street and 1800 North Oneida Street, or the property more commonly known as the former Johnson & Wales University campus. The proposed rezoning is located in Council District 8, which is Councilman Herndon's district. It's in the South Park Hill neighborhood. In 2021, the approximately 25-acre Johnson & Wales University campus was sold to the Urban Land Conservancy, Denver Public Schools, and the Denver Housing Authority. The former campus includes 13 buildings and a variety of open space. Demolition is not proposed for any of these existing structures, but rather these buildings will be adaptively reused for a mix of educational, residential, and other purposes. The proposed rezoning includes only the east and south parcels of the former campus. This is an overall summary of the request and a snapshot of the waiver. The applicant is proposing to maintain the existing CMP-EI zone district with the addition of a waiver to allow for the food preparation and sales commercial use in the Denver zoning code, which will allow local small businesses to use the existing industrial kitchen to produce a range of food items. The current zoning of the subject site is CMP-EI U03. The CMP-EI zone district is a campus zone district intended to be applied to institutions and campuses of larger areas in scale, where additional flexibility is desired to accommodate master planned campus elements. Additionally, the historic structure use overlay, which is U03, applies to the subject site. The overlay allows for some commercial uses, including art studios and bed and breakfast lodging with limitations. The historic structure use overlay may only be established in conjunction with an underlying residential zone district. Therefore, it is not part of the applicant's rezoning request because the requested zone district is a mixed-use zone district. The existing land use on the subject site is mixed use. It's surrounded by mostly single unit uses in the South Park Hill neighborhood. This slide shows the existing context surrounding the subject site with the proposed rezoning on the bottom right. The map amendment application was unanimously recommended for approval by Planning Board last month. All public notice requirements have been met. Since the staff report was published, we've received no public comment. As you know, there are 5 review criteria when analyzing the appropriateness of a request. The first criterion is consistency with adopted plans. There are 3 plans applicable to this rezoning. That's Comprehensive Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, as well as the East Area Plan. This rezoning is consistent with several of the strategies in the comp plan, and they are detailed in the staff report. When looking at Blueprint Denver, the future neighborhood context is special district. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning is appropriate and consistent with this context because it will allow for the adaptive reuse of existing buildings and introduce a new community serving and educational use in a campus setting. Blueprint identifies the future place of this area as campus. Staff finds that concurrent with the proposed office uses and affordable housing on the subject site through the LDR process, it is anticipated that the addition of new employees, educational uses, incubation spaces, and community serving food and beverage services that will result from this rezoning will contribute to the community's mix of educational and employment services. The subject property is located within the district's growth area. These areas are expected to see 15% of new employment growth and 5% of new housing growth by the year 2040. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the growth strategy that is mapped in this area. There was an equity analysis that was conducted on the property, and the subject site is in an area with high access to opportunity, specifically for the neighborhood equity index measurement. The area has a more moderate score when it comes to the built environment measure, including a score of 0 for access to transit. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning to CMP-EI with waivers will provide much needed access to commercial cooking and baking equipment, business development resources, and fresh food for the growing residential population in the South Park Hill neighborhood. By maintaining the CMP-EI base zone district, the applicant is exploring commitments to preserve public access to existing campus open space areas and intends to keep existing campus walkways accessible to the community, thus improving the access to parks and transit measurement. The subject site is in an area that has low vulnerability to involuntary displacement. Concurrent with this rezoning application through the large development review process, the Denver Housing Authority plans to convert existing student housing units into affordable rental units for seniors and others, which will further strengthen this indicator. The subject site is in an area that has below average housing diversity. Although the current rezoning application to allow this new use doesn't propose residential uses, multi-unit residential is an allowed use in the existing and proposed base zone districts, CMP-EI. Maintaining this base zone district has allowed for the provision of affordable multi-unit housing on the former Johnson & Wales campus, and staff finds that this rezoning application will promote a positive impact on the housing diversity metrics in this area. The subject site has a job mix that is dissimilar to the city's overall mix of job types with a greater emphasis on innovation jobs. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning of this new use will allow local small businesses to use existing industrial kitchens to produce a range of food items and have access to on-site workforce development and training in culinary arts and business management, creating a more inclusive range of employment options, thus improving the area's low jobs diversity score. Blueprint also contains high-level policy language for the redevelopment of institutional sites, healthy food and active living, as well as custom zoning. The addition of this use to the CMP-EI zone district furthers all of these strategies by contributing to a truly mixed-use campus that envisions to be community-centered rather than internally focused, The East Area Plan was adopted by Denver City Council in 2020. It contains both general and specific recommendations for the subject site. As mentioned previously, the applicant is not anticipating a major redevelopment of the site. Rather, they are proposing to adaptively reuse buildings while maintaining the campus environment. The proposed rezoning maintains the existing campus zoning on the site with a waiver that expands access for small businesses and promotes healthy food access. Therefore, it is consistent with the general vision set forth in the East Area Plan. Identical to the Blueprint Denver mapping and analysis, which I detailed earlier, the subject site is mapped as special district on the future context map in the East Area Plan and campus on the future places map. Staff finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the future context and future places that is mapped in the East Area Plan. Staff also finds that the requested rezoning meets the next two criteria. The rezoning will result in uniformity of district regulations and will further the public health, safety, and welfare, primarily through its implementation of adopted plans and the reuse of some of the existing structures on the former campus. The application cites the recently adopted East Area Plan and many of the general land use and quality of life recommendations found within Blueprint Denver as a justifying circumstance for this proposed rezoning. The updated plan guidance for this area and the changing conditions justifies the rezoning to allow additional uses and reinvestment in the public interest. Lastly, staff finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the zone district purpose and intent of the CMP-EI zone district. And based on the review criteria, staff recommends the Ludi Committee move the bill forward for consideration by full City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I don't have any speakers in the queue, but I do have Councilman Cashman. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, so this would allow for not just the use of commercial kitchens, but retail restaurant use and
so it would not allow for retail restaurant uses. So they essentially what the programming intends to do is to allow for the kind of the cooking of the food,
right.
And then a lot of times the food trucks will then bring that food into the food truck, and then the goods and services will be sold elsewhere.
Okay, I'm just trying to find where I thought that's what it said. Campus use, provide retail, restaurant, offices, and residential uses.
Oh, yeah, and I'll have to go back. I don't have the zoning code pulled up in front of me, but
that's on slide 15.
Okay, yeah, within the campus zone district, I can double check. I think there is some retail that is allowed, but this use is more for kind of the cooking of like the the use of the industrial kitchens.
Great. If you could check that
Sure.
and get back to me, I'd appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge Councilwoman Sita Baca is online and Councilwoman President Gilmore. Thank you for joining us, to the two of you. Sorry I didn't see you in the queue earlier. So I do have one question, Jason. So CPD has a standard not to use waivers unless that we're coming forward with a text amendment. So is CPD planning to bring forward a text amendment that would allow this campus, the CMP-EI zone district, so the campus zone district, and they would waive the not permitted uses?
So, yeah, within, this really kind of falls onto the new guidance within Blueprint Denver that talks about kind of, reimagining these institutional sites. And so with kind of that high level guidance, as well as kind of some of the quality of life recommendations that, talk about ways to bring fresh food into neighborhoods and to kind of, reimagine and kind of rethink a campus for kind of a community use. That's something that we are exploring. And so that's why we thought that, based on that plan guidance, it is justified to add just kind of that simple waiver in this particular case.
But you will be looking at this zone district to make modifications, is that what I hear you said?
So yeah, with, based on the Blueprint Denver guidance, we are looking at kind of reimagining the kind of these campuses and these institutional uses that are leaving and kind of thinking of ways to kind of reactivate it. So that is absolutely part of it.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other of my colleagues in the queue online or in person. So with that, are there any objections moving this bill forward, Bill 0469, to the full council? Nope. Seeing no objections to from my colleagues, we'll move 0469 to the full council. Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have Bill 0476. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Will do. Thank you, and good morning. Andrew Webb here from Community Planning and Development, presenting on this proposed rezoning of properties at 2524 through 2660 Larimer Street and 2609, 2623, and 2641 Lawrence Street from a mix of former Chapter 59 and Denver Zoning Code zoning to PUDG, or Planned Unit Development District G28. And looks like I'm going to need to fix something here in. Nope, it's going to work.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Excuse me, this proposed rezoning is in Council District 9. It is in the 5 Points statistical neighborhood. The existing zoning of the site is primarily CMU 30, a former mixed-use zone district in the former Chapter 59 zoning code. There are smaller areas within the subject site of IMX 3 and GMU 3 from the Denver zoning code, as well as the billboard and adult use overlays, and the River North design overlay, the DO7. The surrounding zoning is a range of mixed use and residential mixed use zone districts, and a range of 2 to 5 story building heights. Within the subject site, there's quite a range of uses, including office, commercial retail, and light industrial uses. Additional areas of the subject property are currently used for surface parking or are undeveloped and vacant. Surrounding uses include a variety of commercial and retail and office and mixed use, mostly along Larimer corridor, but with some commercial uses on both sides of Lawrence as well. There are 2 nearby historic districts to the northwest of the subject site. You can see here the Ballpark Neighborhood Historic District boundary. And then to the southeast of the site is the Curtis Park Historic District. Existing context is a range, generally speaking, of 1 to 4-story structures. Directly across the street, the Brunetti Lofts is a 4-story structure at Larimer and 26th. There, to the southeast of the property is a new 3-story apartment development, Ava Rhino, and there are several 3.5-story townhomes to the south and east. And then on the north side of the subject site, you will find the 3-story Volunteers of America building. That's actually shown in the photo there at the top right of the slide. And then several other 1 to 2-story structures on the subject site shown on the images below. This request is to rezone to a planned unit development, or PUD G, and this would be PUD number 28 from the Denver zoning code. The PUD would deviate from the standard Denver zoning code districts in several ways. Most notably, it would establish varying height zones within the overall PUD boundary and limit the height of rooftop encroachments. It would impose upper story setbacks on the 3rd and 5th stories, would require 10% publicly accessible open space and pedestrian connections to Lawrence, Larimer, and 26th. And it would require the facade of the Joe's Liquor building to be repaired and integrated into future development. The PUD would also directly incorporate the requirements of the River North Design Overlay, or the DO7, into the district. The other overlays that currently exist, the adult use overlay and the billboard overlay, would be removed as part of this proposed rezoning. In terms of process, the notice of the receipt of this application was sent out to stakeholders in February. Planning board notice was posted in early April, and a planning board public hearing was held on April 20th. The planning board voted 6-1 to recommend approval of this proposed rezoning. We have received quite a bit of public comment, which is all included as part of the packet that came with the staff report for this proposed rezoning. We have received 3 letters of support from registered neighborhood organizations in the area, including the Curtis Park Neighbors, the Heart of 5 Points RNO, and the Rhino Art District Business Improvement District. And then in terms of public comment, we've received approximately 97 letters or written comments and 101 petition signatures indicating support for this proposed rezoning, and 50 letters and comments and 126 approximately petition signatures in opposition. I would highlight here that while we always endeavor to be as accurate as possible, there may be some duplicates reflected in the packet of comments that you all received, and so these numbers are estimates. The applicant began outreach early last year, including presentations to registered neighborhood organizations, several community open houses, presentations to homeowners associations for nearby condos, that sort of thing, council district briefings, and many briefings with other individuals and businesses up through April of this year. With regard to the criteria, the standard criteria for rezoning from the Denver Zoning Code apply as shown on this slide. Regarding the first, consistency with adopted plans, there are 3 adopted plans that would impact the site: Comprehensive Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, and the Northeast Downtown Neighborhood Plan adopted in 2011. This proposed rezoning is consistent with several Comprehensive Plan 2040 recommendations. Most notably, it supports the goals to create a better mix of housing options to stabilize residents and businesses in ways that help them stay in their existing community. It supports the ability to create business opportunities that serve nearby neighborhoods and promote small, locally owned businesses. And finally, it represents an opportunity for infill development where infrastructure and municipal services already exist. The portion of the rezoning area along Larimer is identified with a future neighborhood context of urban center in Blueprint Denver. The proposed PUD, as it applies to this area, is based on the CMX5 and CMX8 zone districts, which are mixed-use zone districts in the urban center context. The portion along Lawrence is shown as general urban in Blueprint, and the proposed PUD that applies to that area along Lawrence is based on the GRX5, which is a residential mixed-use zone district in the general urban context, where commercial uses are secondary to the primary residential use of the district, and provide neighborhood-scaled shops and offices for residents to conveniently access goods and services within walking distance of the community. Blueprint Denver identifies this rezoning area to be within a community corridor and high, medium residential future places. In Blueprint, both of these areas are described as having heights generally up to 8 stories. The proposed rezoning and standards within PUD G28 are appropriate with these future place designations and will foster a better balance of mixed-use opportunities and a strong pedestrian realm. Aligned with those future place designations, the growth strategy for this area is balanced between community centers and corridors and all other areas of the city. Focusing growth in community centers and corridors will help to provide a variety of housing, jobs, and entertainment options within a comfortable distance to all Denverites and is a key element of building complete neighborhoods throughout Denver. The proposed PUD zone district allows a broad range of residential and commercial land uses with a shallow front setback and allows the mix of land uses anticipated for a mixed-use collector street type that is found along Larimer. On the Lawrence side, which is designated as a residential collector, commercial uses are only allowed on the ground floor and businesses are intended to serve the needs of local residents, which is appropriate for that street designation. Blueprint also makes recommendations for improving equity through land use decisions that positively impact certain metrics like the availability of affordable housing, proximity of daily needs and healthcare, and a variety of affordable and available housing types. The next few slides will walk through how the neighborhood surrounding the subject site currently scores on these metrics. With regard to access to opportunity, the census tracts that make up this subject site area have a score of somewhat less equitable compared to the rest of the city. There are higher scores with regard to social determinants to health, like a number of people living in poverty, the number of people with high school diplomas, and then access to centers and corridors and nearby parks, but lower scores with regard to access to healthcare, life expectancy, and childhood obesity. The neighborhood is less vulnerable to involuntary displacement as compared to the rest of the city based on the analysis, primarily due to the higher educational attainment and income in comparison to other areas of the city. And then finally, looks like I skipped a slide or two here. Finally, the housing diversity metrics for the neighborhood show that overall it is not diverse. This is due to a lack of missing middle housing options and a higher percentage of renters to owners, and as well as just generally higher housing costs. This proposed rezoning could directly impact some of these metrics by adding more income-restricted units, providing support for locally owned businesses, and creating opportunities for more community-serving uses such as healthcare or healthy food access. Several recommendations, additional recommendations within Blueprint Denver would be addressed by this proposed rezoning. In particular, the proposal would include a requirement for on-site affordable housing and affordable commercial space. This will increase the amount of mixed income housing near services and amenities and promote new creative industries and small businesses. The PUD standards go above and beyond typical zone districts to help create appropriate transitions from the tallest portion of the proposed rezoning down to the nearby lower scale areas. It also requires the integration of existing structures into the future development, even though they are not officially designated historic structures. Blueprint Denver also recommends against using custom zoning tools like PUDs except when extraordinary circumstances exist. Due to the specific development challenges associated with this proposed rezoning area, that includes integration of existing buildings on site, alley right-of-way vacation and relocation of utilities, overall phasing and timing of development of the site, and creating appropriate transitions into the ballpark and Curtis Park historic districts and residential areas. There is no standard zone districts or combination of zone districts that could successfully address the site's unique and extraordinary circumstances. Finally, the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan, which was adopted in 2011, also applies to this rezoning area. This site falls within two different areas identified in the plan, the Curtis Park neighborhood along Lawrence, and the majority of the site is in the Ballpark River North neighborhood along Larimer. Similarly, the rezoning area is split into two land use descriptions. The area along Larimer is envisioned to be mixed-use industrial, and the area along Lawrence falls into the urban residential category in the Northeast Downtown's neighborhood plan. It is important to note that the urban residential area is intended to be primarily residential, but may include a number of complementary commercial uses. Several recommendations within the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan would be supported by this rezoning. The mix of uses, the mix of building heights and scale, the use of design elements such as upper story setbacks support the goal of transitioning to residential neighborhoods. There are also goals to adaptively reuse existing buildings and to strengthen corridors like Larimer by developing viable retail clusters to serve the people who live, work, and visit the area. The clear area where this proposed rezoning is contradictory to the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan is the concept height map from that plan, which shows this area as 3 stories. The intention of that plan was that the area between Larimer and Arapahoe serve as a transition from taller areas in the northwest to the historic residential character of Curtis Park to the southeast. As discussed earlier, Blueprint Denver also includes height guidance in the description of future places and neighborhood context, in this case 8 stories. In situations where there's conflicting guidance, several factors need to be considered when evaluating a rezoning proposal. Those include the small area plan, the surrounding existing and planned context, the ability to achieve community benefits, and the potential to further urban design goals for the area. The small area plan guidance on height is clearly lower than what is proposed in this PUD, yet there are descriptions in the applicable land use categories that indicate that some flexibility could be appropriate. The Northeast Downtown Neighborhood Plan's mixed-use industrial designation refers to a variety of mid to high density housing options, and mid to high-rise residential structures could be located within the urban residential area. These land use designations do cross over into areas with taller heights than 3 stories, so it needs to be considered in its totality. We also evaluated the purpose of the Larimer to Arapahoe area to serve as a transition from taller heights to lower residential areas. And transitions rarely happen as a clear line from one site to another, but more of a matrix where this transition happens gradually and intermittently. The existing context that is directly adjacent to the site includes a number of 3, 3.5, and 4-story structures as shown on this map. In addition, as part of forthcoming changes to the Denver zoning code as part of the expanding housing affordability program, existing 3-story mixed-use and multi-unit zone districts could automatically qualify for 4 stories, and 5-story districts could qualify for up to 7 stories if they meet enhanced standards for providing affordable housing. This applicant has worked closely with the Department of Housing Stability and the Office of Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization, or NEST, to develop an agreement that will be signed and in place prior to a City Council hearing on this proposed rezoning. It would include meeting the current enhanced requirements for affordable housing as proposed through the EHA program. In addition, they have agreed to provide space for local minority-owned businesses at reduced rents, to sponsor an artist in residence program, an exchange through the Rhino Art District, and to work with Rhino Art District on design review of proposed development of the site, and finally to place covenant restrictions on specific liquor license types for the proposed commercial spaces along the Lawrence side. The proposed rezoning is also integral to maintaining the long-term presence of the Volunteers of America of Colorado on Larimer at its current location, and creating expanded kitchen facilities elsewhere to better provide meals to some of the city's more vulnerable residents. Finally, the proposed PUD modifies the standard Denver zoning code districts to better address urban design goals, including restricting 7-story height to 25% of the total site area, establishing new upper story setbacks that apply on all streets, requiring 10% publicly accessible open space, and integrating existing structures into future redevelopment. With regard to the other criteria for rezonings, this proposed rezoning will result in the uniform application of the base zone districts proposed for this PUD. It will further public health, safety, and welfare by implementing adopted plans and establishing enhanced design standards and open space amenities and pedestrian connections. With regard to justifying circumstances, there has been significant change in development around this rezoning area. And with regard to consistency with neighborhood context, zone district purpose, and intent, this proposed PUD uses a base of CMX8, CMX5, GRX5, and the D07 River North Design Overlay with tailoring to ensure neighborhood compatibility. The zoning code also establishes these 5 criteria for the review of a planned unit district, or PUD. With regard to criterion A for a PUD, this proposed zone district is consistent with the intent and purpose of such districts as stated in Article 9. The customized zoning approach is necessary to receive successful phased development. It is necessary to respect the context of both the ballpark and Curtis Park historic districts nearby, and uses the Denver zoning code based districts and overlay districts to replace former Chapter 59 zoning and address the site's unique circumstances. This proposed rezoning is not intended solely as a vehicle to develop a site inconsistent with applicable neighborhood context or enhance economic feasibility. This PUD is consistent with the urban center and general urban neighborhood context established for the site by Blueprint Denver, and it is intended as a mechanism to ensure that development is consistent with these adopted plans. And finally, the PUD would provide significant public benefits, including affordable housing, small business incubators, design review, the use covenants that I mentioned along Lawrence, and the 10% publicly available open space. The PUD does comply with all of the standards and criteria in the zoning code for a PUD. The PUD is necessary because there is not a standard zone district or combination of zone districts that would address the unique circumstances and especially the transitions to neighboring areas, the creation of new publicly accessible open space. The PUD also establishes permitted uses that are compatible with existing land uses adjacent to the subject property. There are no changes proposed to the allowed uses in the CMX or GRX zone districts. And with regard to PUD criterion E, this PUD would allow the shopfront building form only and would provide tailored standards to address appropriate transitions to neighboring properties and areas. So it does establish building forms that are compatible with adjacent building forms. So finally, with that, CPD recommends that the committee move this forward to City Council for consideration based on a finding that all these review criteria have been met. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. And my apologies, Councilman Chris Hernan, District 8. Came in a little late. Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval, so much for starting the meeting. All right, we've got 2 council members in the queue. Up first, we have Councilman Cashman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Andrew. Good to see you. So help me out with the allowable heights that this PUD permits. Go back over it.
Sure. So it would allow a range of 3 to 5 story or a 3 to 7 story building heights. Let me go back to a slide that actually shows that. So on this slide on the map at the top left there shows the allowable building heights. So as you can see, 4 stories, 7 stories, and 3 stories on the Larimer side, and then a range of 3 and 5 story building heights on the Lawrence side.
And do those include incentive heights? That 7 is the max?
That is correct. The proposed affordable housing agreement that would go along with this is consistent with the enhanced requirements of the EHA program. So there would not be a path to additional building heights at this site with additional affordable housing.
Good deal. Thank you. And so the VOA building is, remind me, is that designated historic?
It is not designated as historic. I believe it was built in the 1990s, but it will remain on the site.
That's right. It was redone. How much residential are we expecting under this PUD?
That's a great question, and I know the applicants are here, and I might actually defer to them to respond to the question about the total number of units. I want to make sure we get that accurate.
Okay.
Hello, council members. I'm Tom Kyler with the applicant. There will be approximately 380 residential units.
Okay, 380, and the agreement is 10% affordable, is that what I'm remembering?
Yes, sir. 10%. That's 60% AMI.
Great, thank you very much. That's all I've got. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Cashman. Councilwoman Torres, you're up.
Thank you. Let's see. The questions that I have, I think are more about how the publicly accessible open space will be achieved. What would that look like?
So the publicly accessible open space would be in the form of kind of a central larger area, and then pathways out to adjoining streets, including the vacation of the alley. I'm going to see if I can find a map that shows what they would look like.
Is it only accessible to, or largely to the people who live there?
My understanding, and I'll certainly invite the applicants up to clarify, but it would be during business hours, it would be accessible to anyone. It is shown on this map here as the area in green.
And the first floor, so to access it, is it through businesses?
To access the publicly accessible open space would actually be from the sidewalk. You can see here there would be access out to 26th Street, access out to Larimer, and public access to Lawrence Street.
Okay, so why would it would be closed though after 5?
Let me invite the applicant back up again, if I could, to speak more specifically to programming for the open space.
It's intended that the open space would be publicly accessible all the time, so that there's the ability for security reasons or safety reasons to close off access, but otherwise that it would be publicly accessible.
Okay, so it's kind of like an interior, like square or garden space or something like that?
Yes,
okay.
An open space that's integrated with nature, so it would be accessible off of the surrounding streets.
Got it, okay. I remember when we chatted before, Tom, this will probably be for you. You had talked a bit about what kind of business engagement, or I don't know if it was specifically entrepreneurship engagement, but can you give me a refresher on the kind of businesses or proprietors that would be kind of incorporated into this?
So we are, as far as our overall retail mix, currently with the property that we're own and manage across the street, there's about 50% of the businesses are owned by women or people of color. So there's diversity in our ownership mix. This property, it'll be a collection of different businesses, but the intention is that there's a similar diversity in the ownership mix, but we're committing to a small business incubator program. So a specific program that designates 5,000 square feet where we're focused exclusively on businesses owned by people of color, women, or veterans, to work with businesses that can apply and be a part of that would have the ability to come into that space. And so we're working there with a local community relationship with a gentleman, Javon Taylor from Green Spaces, to help administer that program.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tom. Andrew, the setbacks, am I understanding that correctly, that the custom setbacks, it would set back at the 3rd story and then again at the 5th story?
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Torres. Councilwoman Sandoval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andrew. On the existing zone districts, there's nothing in the area that's over 5 stories, and there's contradictory plan guidance. So one plan says nothing over 3. Blueprint Denver says something different. How did you land on 7 stories?
Yeah, so well, the 7 stories was proposed by the applicant, but anytime we consider a proposal, proposed rezoning, we look at the totality of plan guidance for a site. So we look at, in this case, an older neighborhood plan has some guidance, and we look at the guidance provided by Blueprint, and we take into consideration the development and change that has happened especially along the Larimer corridor, since the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan was adopted. And then we also look at the community input received, especially that from RNOs in the area. I would compare this to other recent rezonings, rezoning at Colfax and Calumet, for example, in the La Alma Lincoln Park neighborhood in 2019, where there was an older neighborhood plan with 5-story guidance, but community support as reflected through the registered neighborhood organization for 12-story building heights that was ultimately found to be consistent with the plan guidance, essentially, or the proposal was found to be consistent with a totality of plan guidance for that site. So we kind of look at a combination of existing and new development since an area plan was adopted, neighborhood impact, and attributes like that.
And are we turning through this PUD? It's so complicated. I've never seen a PUD use 3 different zone districts as its base. So it's a lot to comprehend. Am I reading it correctly that Lawrence would have the change from, it would turn it to, because right now most of Lawrence is GRX5 or GMU3, which is mostly residential. I think you can do some ground floor, but it's not on the corner. It's UMX2, but are we putting business on Lawrence through this PUD?
Well, as you noted here, based on the existing zoning, some RX and MX already does exist along Lawrence, and there already are some businesses along Lawrence. The base zone district in the PUD that would apply along Lawrence here would be the GRX, which is the residential mixed use that only allows commercial uses on the ground floor and is primarily focused on residential uses, but it would, I would say, retain the existing limited allowance for commercial uses along Lawrence.
And does it mandate ground floor retail on the ground floor, or is it just, it's allowed use?
It's allowed.
Okay, so you can do 100% residential?
That is correct.
In the RX zone districts, but it is one of the zone districts that allows it and calls it out for it.
That's correct.
More importantly. Okay, and then talk to me about how we got to how the recommendation was to get a PUD, because PUDs are not easy to do in the city and county of Denver with CPD, and we have clear guidance on when a PUD is allowed. There's 5 criteria based on 12.4.10.9. Which of the criteria did you utilize? A, B, C, D, or E?
We used the unique and extraordinary circumstances criteria, taking into consideration the number of properties, existing development on the site, integration of several existing structures on the site into new development, proposed vacation of alleyways, and generally the need to ensure that there was a coordinated redevelopment of this site that is under single ownership.
So, according to CPD's assessment, a standard zone district, even if you broke this up into different parcels, like if you did one block and then how you have a little tail in like a flagpole, a standard zone district would not be able to produce these type of outcomes, fill in the blank, because why?
That is correct, and I'll use as an example the applicant's commitment to a maximum of 7 stories on the Larimer side. We don't have a standard zone district that has a maximum of 7 stories.
And so it was that, because couldn't you technically do see like 5 stories and wave up to 7 if we were looking at exploring a 7-story zone district?
Conceivably, but consistent with our waiver policy per the earlier discussion, I'm not aware of any plans in the future to amend the zoning code to create 7-story districts. And given the other elements of this proposed rezoning, it was determined that rather than try to shoehorn in standard zone districts with waivers, to use a custom zoning approach.
Okay. And then when we're looking at plan guidance, when do we have Blueprint Denver, which is more general, it's citywide, take precedent over a smaller neighborhood plan that's not that antiquated, but it's not as new as Blueprint Denver? How do we balance those two?
Yeah, that's a great question, and each case is unique in the way we do that analysis, but it is based on kind of conditions on the ground that have occurred or evolved since the adoption of the neighborhood plan. And I would say more importantly, what we've heard from community members and from registered neighborhood organizations, we look at our overarching city goals for encouraging more new housing, for example, and jobs on community corridors. Essentially kind of fold all those elements together into an analysis when we have a situation like this. And Blueprint does give some guidance for addressing that balance, citing some of those elements.
Okay, and one last question. I don't have the map in front of me. The expanding housing affordability, they have that blue map that has the incentive areas where you could actually, if you build more affordable housing, you would be able to have a height incentive. Is this area within that map? Other areas, so like not this pertaining to this rezoning or pertaining to this rezoning, what does that EHA map look like for this particular area? Because if it were, they could have rezoned to a base height of 5, and then if the EHA, the incentive, they could have gone up to 8 to have more than 10%. They could have actually gone into we could have gotten a higher amount of rezoning, and they could have taken advantage of the height incentive. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think so, although I may invite Brad from Host Up to speak specifically to the EHA program. I don't have that map that you referenced on hand, but I can say that everything, I pulled the existing zoning map back up on screen, and everything that is all the zone districts that are standard Denver zoning code districts as shown on this map, the EHA program would be applicable to those areas.
Okay, I'll find it while we're looking, but you can move on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. We have Councilwoman Zeta Baca online.
Hi, thank you. I have some more questions related to Councilwoman Sandoval's. I am confused as to why both sides of the block had to be in the PUD. Why couldn't we, since we were only going up on the 7 side on Larmer, why couldn't that have been done separately within the zoning code and not a PUD?
Two reasons that I would cite. The first is that half of or more than half of the Lawrence side is under the former Chapter 59, the old code, and so anytime we're doing a rezoning, we're always looking for opportunities to rezone out of the former Chapter 59 and into the Denver zoning code. And then additionally, some of the customization and tailoring that is provided by the PUD, we wanted to make sure that applied all the way around, most notably the upper story step back requirements that would essentially reduce the appearance of taller buildings from kind of looming over the street and require that upper stories are stepped back. So we looked at elements like that, and considering that this is a single site under under one ownership, the approach of a coordinated PUD for this entire development seemed like the prudent approach.
Can an assemblage happen and the right-of-way of the alley happen without a PUD?
I don't know that I don't know that there's anything that would prevent vacation of an alley outside of a PUD or development of the site, but a coordinated development that all responds to the same urban design standards, for example, like the required building frontage and build-to range and building transparency. It was our thinking that it would be clearer and result in a more predictable outcome to have the entire area under similar zone districts.
Were any other scenarios run through? Are there any other options without the PUD that were considered?
We consider what an applicant brings to us, and in this particular case, the applicant came and made a case for the complexity and size of this site being appropriate for a PUD, and so that is the approach that we examined.
I don't think I captured an answer to Councilwoman Sandoval's question about the 7 stories. There's nothing in the area that even is going above 5. And so I'm curious about what led the applicant to the 7 stories?
Invite the applicant to rejoin me here at the lectern and speak to that. That would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. John McIntyre with Tribal Architects on the applicant team. I think one of the things that has really driven the understanding of heights on the site is the idea of appropriate transition, and the idea of appropriate transition both in terms of a scaling down from the community corridor along Larimer Street to the adjacent neighborhoods, which is driving the 3, 5, and 7-story transitions that are quite specific in this site, alongside the enhanced upper story setbacks on all frontages of the site, rather than just on Larimer, which will be required under the base zoning. So that idea of appropriate zoning and transition in terms of heights, but also appropriate transition in terms of plan guidance, I think as we talk about the broader goals of both plans, we've I think, presented very strongly the fact that the plan that we have here is meeting those broader goals beyond just the height. But we also were we were also considering this idea of appropriate transition between the kind of 3 stories and the up to 8 stories that are listed within Blueprint Denver. And we didn't feel the need to push the scale of development to that 8-story limit, but we did feel that a 753 was an appropriate transition within that environment to provide both for a shift in scale that will transition successfully across the block between the sort of plan guidance and between the existing urban character of the neighborhoods, and also allows for a kind of a degree of complexity in terms of the massing of the site, which is why you're seeing quite specific height guidance within the PUD, to ensure that there is actually some complexity and diversity in the scale of the buildings on the site. We, in fact, will have some 1-story buildings, some 4-story buildings, and things in the middle. And I think that's in response also to ensuring that that kind of character of diversity which exists in the neighborhood remains, rather than just more flat, consistent assemblages of buildings, which we tend to be seeing coming up currently. So that, again, was part of the driver for the PUD in terms of those heights and stepping. Is that?
Yeah, and we see that those flat heights for a reason, because that's what all of the plans suggest is appropriate in the area. And so I'm curious about the housing scenarios in the allowed 3-story heights of the plans. What would you guys capture in those 3-story heights? Did you run different scenarios for housing units?
And I'm not sure I fully understand. You're asking, did we look at whether, or did the applicant look at whether the number of units they're proposing would be feasible in a 3-story zone district.
Not the number that they're proposing. How many would they have captured in the 3-story zone district that is identified in all of the plans?
Homer.
I can talk to this again. I think, yes, we did analyze a number of different scenarios for the development in terms of scale and massing. And I think the end result of that analysis was that schemes that were only 3 stories tall, including the kind of retail offering that we're looking to provide at the ground floor, and weren't able to deliver, one, that quantity of retail, two, the activation or scale of the open space and public realm within the block, and three, weren't able to deliver more fully or as fully against the broader objectives of the plan guidance beyond just those specifics that relate to height, but the broader totality of the plan guidance in terms of mixed use along the commercial corridor, increased mixed use density up to that commercial corridor, appropriate transitions from that corridor down into the neighborhood, the provision of open space, the provision of jobs on the site. A lot of those broader plan objectives just weren't able to be met with that.
Can you tell me where the affordable housing units will be within those 7 stories? Are they going to be all on the ground floor? Are there going to be some on the 7th floor? Where will those be integrated? And how many rooms are we getting in those 38 units?
Throughout the development. So
On
they'll be
every
integrated
floor
throughout. Yeah, we're not pieces of affordable housing on the site. They'll be fully integrated with the balance of the housing units across the site to create a more diverse residential community.
So there will absolutely be affordable units on the 7th floor?
There'll be a like-for-like requirement for affordable units. So for instance, if we have a large 3-bed market rate unit, we will be required to have a large 3-bed affordable unit. So the units will be matched. I couldn't commit to the fact that they're on the 7th floor at this stage, but we can commit to the idea that those units will be provided in like-for-like with regards to the affordable, the market rate housing, because we have to maintain that consistency across the unit types.
How many rooms will the affordable units have?
The mix of affordable units will match the mix of market rate units. So if we have studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, and 3 beds in market, we will have studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, and 3 beds in affordable.
Do you all have a plan for that?
Yeah, the unit mix, we've talked about that in terms of the range of units, but yes, we're just starting to get into the design of some of those units, but we're in early stages yet. But the affordable will follow the market rate in terms of its complexion. That's the plan.
And so I heard Andrew say in the very beginning when he was going through the blueprint strategies that this could impact the missing middle housing. Can you tell me which part of this development is capturing missing middle?
Sure, I can speak to that and maybe ask the applicants to clarify additionally, but that would include smaller housing units, and it would also include the larger units, like 3-bedroom units would fall into that category as well.
And can you tell me why you called this custom zoning? Why is custom zoning different than spot zoning, or how?
So custom zoning would be where you're applying zoning that is still consistent with the adopted plan guidance, like the blueprint guidance for future neighborhood context, for example, is urban center and urban residential on this property, and the proposed PUD is a customized district that is based on zone districts from those contexts. Whereas, an example of spot zoning might be where you're proposing to apply a neighborhood context or a zone district that is completely at odds with what an area plan or a citywide plan like Blueprint recommends. But custom zoning is essentially the tailoring of a zone district to address certain site-specific needs, like the upper story step backs, the additional build-to requirements, special setbacks for ground floor residential to ensure we don't have residential right up against the sidewalk, that sort of thing.
So are you suggesting that the blueprint recommendation around urban center and urban residential implies a height limit?
Well, actually, both of those future contexts in blueprint are described in blueprint as being appropriate for development of up to 8 stories. And then we look at other policies and recommendations and adopted plans like the Northeast Downtown Area Plan for further guidance there. But I would say that what is proposed here is in terms of height. When you look at all of the height that is allowed on the site, only 25% of the site could go up to the 7 stories. I would say that what is proposed here is below what would be typically allowed in an area designated as an urban center or a urban residential future neighborhood context.
So I see us flip-flop back and forth often. Sometimes we say that the more micro level plan is the most specific and so should trump the other plans. And what I'm hearing from you right now is the opposite, that the macro level plan should trump the more specific plan. Can you explain to me why we flip back and forth on that and what the general rule is?
Certainly, it's always case by case, but Blueprint does give latitude to consider things like community input and additional benefits that are identified by our adopted plans, including the comp plan and Blueprint. Things like affordable housing, subsidized spaces for small local businesses, that sort of thing. So. We look at each individual application on its own merits, and in this particular case, we did find that the proposal was generally consistent with that allowance for flexibility, and are recommending some deviation from the area plan height guidance here, based on what we've heard from the community and the additional community benefits that are proposed.
So you're telling me that community input is factoring into this, but I saw that it's a pretty neck and neck situation with opposition and support. Can you tell me which community input factored into this deviation and what the opposition's content was and why that didn't factor into it?
Well, we certainly look at all of the input that comes in. I pulled the slide back up that shows the estimates of what we've heard, and we looked at the letters of support from the RNOs in the neighborhood, including Curtis Park Neighbors, which has worked closely with this with the applicants to better understand what is being proposed and how it will integrate into the community. For what I know has been a site that the neighborhood has long been wondering what its future was, and certainly we provide all of the comments received, regardless of the input to the planning board and the city council, which ultimately make those decisions. But based on what we heard with 97, nearly 100 letters in support, as well as the support of 3 key registered neighborhood organizations whose boundaries include this site. It appeared to us that the totality of, or the majority of, community input appeared to be in support of what is proposed here.
So you all, you reviewed the opposition. What was the opposition saying? That's a lot of opposition.
So, and you have copies of all of the letters and comments that we received. I would characterize the opposition in maybe 2 key areas. One being concerns about the addition of traffic and on-street parking demand to the area, and then generally on building height. And then additionally, I would add another there, I guess, concerns about expanding commercial uses on Lawrence.
So we've dealt a lot with the height. Can you talk about how the other primary buckets of concern are addressed?
Traffic, and I would invite, I can invite the applicants up to speak more in detail about this if necessary, but the intent is to have access to the site provided primarily, I'm going to pull the map back up here, primarily off of 27th Street and through kind of through the alley into on-site structured parking. And so that is how the applicants here propose to address the traffic concerns. And then with regard to businesses and commercial uses along Lawrence, and I think what we heard in terms of the support, for example, from the RNOs is
hold on a second. I'm trying to see on that photo where is the parking entering and exiting?
I don't think it's actually shown on this map, but on the essentially the right side of the diagram there, at kind of the midpoint along 27th Street. Do I have that right, gentlemen? Yeah, at the existing alley location there between Larimer and Lawrence, exiting northbound and off onto 27th Street, that's where vehicle access would be taken from.
For both directions, in and out.
And then with regard to the commercial uses along Lawrence, there have been several commitments made, including the restrictive covenants for the properties to restrict liquor licenses and some of those kind of uses, and a commitment to more community serving uses as called for in the residential mixed use or RX zone districts.
And a final question, are there any ownership opportunities for any of the units, whether commercial or residential, in the whole development?
Ask applicants to respond to that.
So the Volunteers of America will retain ownership of their office space within the project, as well as 30 associated parking spaces to go with that. As far as the residential or commercial spaces, we haven't intended any ownership like any condominium type structures yet, but we're still talking about that. So it's not planned as of right now.
And will there be a formal community benefits agreement?
There are. Would you like to speak to that? Okay.
Good morning, council members. Councilwoman Sita Baca, to your question. As you know, we're entering into the city standard affordable housing agreement, which includes the restrictive covenant. Separately, we are working with 3 community partners to provide community benefits. Those will include provision of commissary space, partnering with a community partner and a nonprofit, and to provide some commissary space near the site for below market rent. Additionally, so the city is not a party to that agreement and has asked not to be a party to that agreement, but we're working with Nest and they are supportive of this arrangement. The second will be a community partnership agreement for the small business incubator. And so here we're going to be creating a small business incubator program. We're going to have training, opportunities to interface with the existing retailers surrounding both local and national to sort of leverage trading opportunities. And eventually the participants in the small business incubator program will be able to rent space at the property also at a below market rent after a period of training and support to sort of set those small business incubators up for success. And so that is also a separate agreement. The city has asked not to be a party, but we are working with Nest and they are also supportive of the arrangement. And the third agreement will be for an artist in residency and exchange program. And so the applicant is working with a local community partner and then separate local artists to provide training and transportation to go to other sites in Dallas and Houston where the applicant has other properties and other sort of mixed-use commercial spaces. So we'll provide training opportunities, help them to support with their marketing efforts, and then the applicant will be providing a subsidy for travel and hotel, and then a space for those local Denver artists to market their work in the other area. And so that agreement also will be signed by the time we come to City Council in June. The city, again, has asked not to be a party, but the city is aware of and supportive of the arrangement.
Thank you. I would love more details to the applicant. I would love to see details. I know we have a meeting scheduled, and I'm very curious about the community benefit agreements, as well as the lease lengths and the commitment to how much below market rate we're talking. So I will be asking for that in our meeting, and that is it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. Seeing no other questions, we have a motion to move 476 to the full body by Councilwoman Black. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Torres. Any objections from voting members? Hearing none, 476 moves to the full council. Thank you all very much. Andrew, I think you've got the next one, 477, ADU, District 1.
Great. Thank you. Andrew Webb again from Community Planning and Development, here to present this proposed rezoning of properties in the Regis neighborhood from USUC to USUC1. This proposed map amendment is sponsored by Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, and it would rezone properties that currently have single-unit residential zoning in the Regis neighborhood to allow accessory dwelling units. Obviously, it is in the Regis neighborhood. It would encompass approximately 1,025 parcels, or about 145 acres. And it would reestablish essentially the existing underlying single unit zoning in the urban neighborhood context, but add that one to allow accessory dwelling units. And this rezoning is requested to facilitate the construction of accessory dwelling units. Existing zoning, as I mentioned, is USUC. There are a couple of properties in the Regis neighborhood that have already previously gone through the rezoning process to establish the USUC 1 zone district. Surrounding zoning includes former Chapter 59 campus zoning for Regis University, UMX 3 along Lowell Boulevard, the little commercial strip across from and to the south of the university. And then along Federal there, you can see some commercial corridor zoning. There is a 2-unit zoning in Adams County, so outside of the city and county of Denver to the north. And then OSA covers the golf course primarily to the west. And then the south is divided by I-70, but below that is additional USUC and then OSA at Rocky Mountain Lake Park. Existing land uses are primarily residential. There are a handful of existing 2-unit and multi-unit residential uses within the subject site, and then commercial uses near and around the university and along Federal. This slide gives an example of some of the existing built form in the area, including houses in the existing 1- and 2-story houses are in the western area of the Regis neighborhood and in the eastern area south of Regis University, as well as a photograph there at the bottom of the commercial corridor along Lowell. Public outreach for this proposed rezoning began last year with property owner flyers and mailers, a series of virtual town halls held in December, and an online survey that ran from November to February of this year. The informational notice for the receipt of this application went out in March. We held a planning board hearing on April 20th, and the planning board voted unanimously to recommend moving this forward to the city council with a recommendation of approval. We've not received any comments from RNOs about this proposed rezoning, but we have received about 35 letters or written comments from community members in support of the proposed rezoning, and 2 written comments from community members opposing this rezoning, citing concerns about additional on-street parking demand. Oh, and I should also note that a detailed survey response was included in the packet. It's part of the application for this rezoning, and it shows that a majority of neighborhood residents who responded to the survey were approved of this proposed rezoning. As this is a legislative rezoning, there are 3 criteria shown here that the council must find this proposed rezoning is consistent with. With regard to the first criterion, consistency with adopted plans, there are 3 plans that, or two land use plans and another policy plan that impact this proposal: Comprehensive Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, and then the Denver Office of Housing Stability's 5-year plan. Comprehensive Plan 2040 makes multiple recommendations for expanding the allowance of accessory dwelling units as a way to help people remain in place and perhaps house elderly parents, and to create additional diversity of housing with smaller, often lower cost units. The comprehensive plan also recommends promoting infill development, especially kind of gentle infill like accessory dwelling units where infrastructure and services are already in place. Blueprint Denver identifies the Regis neighborhood as being within the urban neighborhood context, and this proposed rezoning would be the urban neighborhood context, a single unit, C1, so it would be consistent with that future neighborhood context recommendation. It is within the low residential future land use designation within Blueprint. So that is where you would see primarily single and 2 unit land uses, residential uses, and where ADUs are appropriate according to Blueprint. The Regis neighborhood is served by a variety of street types that range from residential collectors on 50th and Tennyson to the commercial arterial along Federal, and then of course a typical grid of local streets. Regis is within the all other areas as identified within Blueprint, where we expect to see mostly more housing growth than job growth by 2040. With regard to Blueprint Denver's equity concepts, this area generally has average access to opportunity. There is lower childhood obesity, and the data show a higher access to healthcare opportunities at the site. This proposed rezoning will increase the availability of housing in an area that already has good access to jobs and services. The Regis neighborhood is found to be less vulnerable to involuntary displacement based on all 3 of the metrics that are considered by Blueprint. There is a higher median household income, a lower percentage of renters relative to property owners as compared to the rest of the city, and a higher level of educational attainment. This proposed rezoning would continue expansion of housing options, potentially as a wealth building tool and an opportunity to keep current residents in place. The Regis neighborhood has higher than average housing diversity. It does have some housing that falls into the missing middle category. It does have some larger homes, so 3 and 4 bedroom homes. It has a generally higher rate of home ownership versus rental. It does have a variety of housing costs and does already have some affordable units. This proposed rezoning would essentially strengthen that by adding a new housing type that are typically smaller and lower cost. The Denver Host 5-year strategic plan does include several policies recommending the expansion of accessory dwelling units throughout the city and removing barriers for their construction. This proposed rezoning would uniformly apply the USUC1 zone district to the Regis neighborhood the same way it would impact any other neighborhood where the USUC1 zone district is applied. And it would further public health, safety, and welfare by furthering and implementing adopted plans like Blueprint, which do call for the expansion of accessory dwelling units. So with that, CPD recommends the committee move this forward to the City Council for a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions or comments? 477? Seeing none, is there a motion to move 477 to the full council?
So moved.
Moved by Councilwoman Torres. We need a second. Seconded by Councilman Cashman. Any objections, voting members? Seeing none, 477 moves to the full council. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have a lot of items on consent, so any issues, please see myself or Zach. Seeing no other business before this committee, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.